All right, welcome everyone. Great to have you all on our first OCAN Fireside Chat, which hopefully may be the first of many more. For those of you who are new to us, let me just give a brief introduction. My name is Ken Liu, and I'm the Executive Director of the Orthodox Christian Attorney Network, or OCAN. And we are a national fellowship of attorneys with a mission to help Orthodox attorneys integrate our faith with our careers, to help strengthen the Orthodox Church, and to impact our communities and nation with the love of Christ. And our topic today falls within the first part of our mission, which, stated another way, is to help us attorneys become more than just attorneys who happen to be Orthodox, but to be truly Orthodox Christian attorneys and discover what that means, journeying together through our careers. And I thought about organizing this event for a very personal reason. After about 3 years of study, I just recently completed the OCA diaconal training program, and by God's grace, am scheduled to be ordained as a deacon on November 3rd at my church, St. Mary's, a Romanian OCA parish in Northern Virginia. And since I knew several of these stellar attorneys who are also Orthodox deacons, I thought it'd be great if I could get some advice from them. And then I thought, well, if they have good advice for me, it'd probably be great advice for everyone else to hear too. And so I've invited them here today for the benefit of us all. And I'll start by introducing OCAN's spiritual advisor, Father David Khorey, and then let him introduce the other three. Father David is currently the associate pastor of St. Nicholas Antiochian Orthodox Church in Grand Rapids, Michigan. But before that, he was a graduate of Vanderbilt Law School and a partner at a large regional law firm where he practiced labor and employment law for nearly 4 decades. And before he became a priest just last year, he himself had been a deacon since 2003 and elevated to Archdeacon in 2010. And we're super grateful that Father David has agreed to serve as OCAN's spiritual advisor. Now, thought I would share, get us into the mood a little bit. I don't know what the temperature is where you all are, but I hope you have your mug of hot chocolate ready to join in what should be a really cool conversation. And we build this as a fireside chat because it's not a formal webinar like we've previously done, but just a casual conversation that we get to listen in on. But we do want it to be interactive. So if you have a question for any of the deacons, feel free to type it in the chat box, and I'll either chime in at an appropriate time, or we can save it till the end of the deacons' discussions. So without further ado, Father David.
Thank you, Ken. I'm tempted to say thank you also to our sponsor, the Hallmark Channel, with that fireplace. But I do want to thank everybody for participating and encourage them to use the chat function, as Ken mentioned, especially since we have some other deacons here. But thank you to all participating today. Thank you to our panelists, especially. And also a very special thank you to Ken Liu, the executive director of OCAN, who has worked so hard as well in a timely, inspired and inspiring way to build up this group of Orthodox Christian attorneys, the Orthodox Christian Attorneys Network, so that we all have a chance to explore what it means to be an Orthodox Christian, what it means to be an attorney, what it means to be an Orthodox Christian attorney. So thank you, Ken, for all your hard work in making this program and happen in the development of OCAN as we move forward.
Thank you.
And God bless your work on this. As moderator, I don't plan to say much, but I would like to start with prayer. If you would all pray with me, please, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Almighty God, our help and our refuge, source of wisdom and tower of strength, you know we can do nothing without your guidance and help. Help and direct us to divine wisdom and power, that by your grace we may have eyes to see and ears to hear, and we may find words that are edifying to our brothers and sisters, and to the glory of your holy name. For the kingdom and the power and the glory are yours, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, now and forever. Amen. Today we have the opportunity to explore these questions of what it means to be an Orthodox Christian, what it means to be an attorney, what it means to be an Orthodox Christian attorney, more fully through the lens of three members of a particular group within the set of Orthodox attorneys. Those Orthodox attorneys who also are ordained to serve in the Holy Diaconate, who are deacons who serve not only in a church jurisdiction, but also a civil jurisdiction. Those who petition not only our Lord for relief, but also the court. Those who speak through their pleadings, those who are governed by at least two sets of canons in their lives. I say that somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but only somewhat. It is a contest, thank God, to be in the world, but not of the world, to have a foot in each world, perhaps to have 2 feet simultaneously in each world at the same time, we might say. Today's panelists, as I think you will hear, engage in that spiritual contest in a way that offers all of us lessons and examples for our own spiritual development. And along the way, we might get some good professional advice as well from our esteemed speakers today on this chat. So let me start, if I may, by asking each of them to tell us how they got here, how they today find themselves talking to a group of fellow Orthodox in the legal profession about their lives in the church and in the law. And if I could start by asking Protodeacon David maybe to go first on that and tell us about himself and, again, how he finds himself here today.
Yeah.
Deacon David.
Thank you, Father. My name is Protodeacon David Keim. I'm attached at All Saints Orthodox Church in Raleigh, North Carolina. It's a parish of the Antiochian Archdiocese. I've just passed my 20th anniversary of my ordination just earlier this month. And I have one wife and 6 children, and currently 3 grandchildren, and I'm expecting one more on Monday, God willing.
Congrats.
So,
Bless you.
thank you. You know, one of the things that attracted me to the diaconate is as when we moved to Raleigh, and I moved to Raleigh for my a legal job. One of the things that I noticed was that our priest was really busy doing a lot of things like setting up chairs and lighting candles and trimming wicks and doing things that I thought he could use some help. And so when I went to be helpful, one of the things I discovered is there's this role of deacon, and it's sort of one thing led to another. And he suggested that I should start in the St. Stephen's program, which is a diaconal formation program in the Antiochian Archdiocese. And again, one thing led to another, and I struck up a relationship with our bishop, and he saw fit to ordain me, and so I have been exercising that ministry ever since, and it's been quite a blessing, and honestly, it's been the greatest privilege of my life. I can't imagine. It's been more than I ever expected it would be. It's been an incredible. It's been a wonderful gift to me. I'm still kind of pinch myself at the altar to think that people trust me to do this stuff. I'm really grateful that I have the opportunity. On the professional side, I've been with a company called SAS Institute. SAS is a is a large company. I've been with SAS for 26 years. I'm Senior Vice President and General Counsel for Corporate Matters. SAS is a software company. We're multinational, fairly large, privately held company. Most of our peers that are our size are public companies, and so we're kind of a unicorn in that regard. It's a almost 50-year-old company. we're looking at our first run at the public markets right now. That's largely my project. I manage all of the legal services for everything other than our customer-facing transactional work. So, which is a lot. It's a pretty varied practice. I lead a large team of lawyers and other professionals that handle everything that you can think of that a large company would need. So real estate, corporate compliance, trade compliance, HR and benefits, intellectual property, of course, is a massive part of what we do. Litigation management, M&A. I happen to have a specialty in tax, so I help our finance and tax teams with those kinds of things as well. So that's how I got to where I'm at, both professionally and in the church. And I like to think these two areas kind of complement each other. I do believe that God brought us to this area so that I could do both of these things, and I'm grateful for that.
Archdeacon Justin.
So yeah, thank you, Father. I'm Archdeacon Justin Bosl. I serve as the Archdeacon of the Metropolis of San Francisco in the GOA, and every now and then I get to be home at my parish in Castro Valley. But more often than not, I'm bouncing around with the Metropolitan in the various 7 Western states. I practiced law for quite a few years, just shy of 19 years at a firm in Oakland, where I was a partner as a trial lawyer, doing primarily catastrophic personal injury, toxic tort cases on the plaintiff side, and was then ordained a deacon in 2021. And it was sort of a full circle thing in that as an undergrad, I had studied to be a Catholic priest. And the more I studied, the more I came to realize 2 things. 1, I needed a wife, and 2, that the Orthodox were right. And those things led me to leave the priestly training program I was in, marry my high school sweetheart, and then say, now what do I do with a philosophy degree? And I thought, well, I don't see myself wearing a beret and sitting in a French cafe, so I guess I better go to law school. And so I did. And after the first year of law school, my wife and I converted to Orthodoxy. And I was very happy practicing law when I was the parish council president, overseeing the transition from one priest to the next. And the new priest and I sit down to have a coffee to kind of talk about the state of the parish and let him know the things that he needs to know as he takes the helm. And at the end of it, he just looks at me and says, we didn't really get to the business. It was more like 2 seminary buddies just sitting around talking. Have you ever thought about being a deacon? And fast forward a few years, and the bishop was laying hands on me. So it was sort of a full circle thing from seminary to law school to ordination. I don't practice very much anymore, although I chair the legal committee for our Metropolis and serve on a variety of other legal committees throughout the church. But mostly my ministry as of last year is full-time.
Deacon Andrew.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Andrew Cross, and I'm a deacon at St. George Cathedral in Pittsburgh. If you look on the website, it's actually in a neighborhood called Oakland, which is a sign of our dysfunction as an Orthodox church in America, which is okay. It's functional dysfunction, so I guess it works. Anyway, I have been a deacon since 2006. I went through the same Antiochian program for diaconal formation that Deacon David went through, and I went through it with him. So he's a friend from many years ago. We both had darker beards at the time, to recall. And so I practice in my professional life. I've been a lawyer for about 25 years now, and I, in some form or fashion, just help people that are managing or using money, I guess is the easiest way to explain it. I deal with transactions and regulations that relate to money. So that's my professional life.
Thank you. Our Protodeacon David, you mentioned something about being helpful as kind of something that triggered your interest in the diaconate. I remember when I was interviewing for the job that I got, my first legal job, the senior partner sat across from me, and his question to me was basically, he said that his 8-year-old son asks him, "What does a lawyer do?" And he tells him he helps people. And he asked me, what did I think of that? You always remember that question, because we help people in a sense. We help our clients. We hope to help our clients. And I was struck by your comment that it was that helping nature. And I'll throw this to you, and everyone else can chime in here. There seems to be in service, in the service aspect, this through line of being a deacon and a lawyer of service. That's a particular quality or aspect of life that runs through both those things. In what ways do you think that service is the key to kind of responding to that issue of how to be in the world but not of the world? If I could ask you guys to comment on that.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you. So somebody asked my then 6 to 8-year-old son the same question: what does your dad do? And he said, "Oh, he's a lawyer." And they said, "Oh, well, what does that mean?" And he said, "Well, I think it means he takes out the trash," which not really wrong. He's right. But I think that's because that's what he saw me doing around the house the most. I mean, I guess that's the task that was assigned to me at the house. I took out the trash. That was my assigned duty. So somehow he thought that's what I did all day long. Is I went to my office and just took out the trash. But no, you're right. Helping people. Yeah. So I think that that this is something that is sort of part and parcel of both roles, isn't it? I mean, of course, this is what it means to be a deacon, is to serve, and it is what it is to be an attorney as well. I mean, we serve in a variety of roles as professional attorneys, whether we are advocates or agents or counselors. It always strikes me too, when I think of the list of things that we do as attorneys, that these are the roles that Christ plays for us as well. So, we, in many ways, the legal profession, certainly as it's come to us in our world, in the sort of post common law or common law tradition, is that we play this role that is sort of I don't know whether it's based on Christ's ministry to us, but that's the role we end up playing as attorneys if we do it right. And of course, as deacons, that is also our role, right? We bear an image of Christ as servant, and unlike priests and bishops who bear images of Christ differently, bear image of Christ as shepherd and as king, and we bear the image of Christ as servant, which of course he also was. And so I feel like I haven't fully teased all this out. I don't have my theology of this completely baked, but I feel like there is this connection, that the service element of both roles is really important, and that we do have this opportunity to represent Christ in both roles, in both of our service areas. It's really obvious in the diaconal role, because That's what we do. It may be less obvious to us in the attorney role, but I don't think it needs to be less obvious. I think that we can incarnate that, put flesh on those bones, and be Christ in the office and in the courtroom and in the classroom and in the public square.
Deacon Andrew, Archdeacon Justin, anything to add to that?
Deacon Andrew, go ahead.
I would add to that. In terms of help, a bit in jest, but a bit serious. I think it's a Dr. Seuss book that says sometimes some kind of help is the kind of help that help is all about, and some kind of help is the kind of help we all can do without. When you practice law, you learn how to be helpful in a helpful way and not helpful in a disruptive way. And it takes a while to learn, at least for me. And it's something that I feel like I have to get better at every day in my legal practice, is figuring out how to be helpful to clients and knowing what my role is in the situation. I was blessed, though, to be taught a lot for many years by now Bishop John Abdallah from the Antiochian Archdiocese. He was my priest from about 5 years old until he became a bishop. And Bishop John, it's funny you brought up taking out the trash. If anybody has ever seen Bishop John in action, to this day, I'm certain he's taking trash out somewhere. He would move too fast to be able to help him. And if you tried to help him, you'd screw something up for him. So he taught me both of those lessons. But I am always struck, liturgically, it reminds me of what we're trying to do with our clients in some small way, or at least what we try to bring to them, which is at the washing of the feet. If you're at a cathedral with a bishop and they wash the feet of the parishioners before the Holy Friday Matins on Holy Thursday evening, it is just one of these things that kind of puts you in your place to think of the care and attentiveness and love that Christ gives to us, even though, he doesn't have to. It really draws you into servanthood more than anything. And for me, at least, I try to be reminded of that, because it's very easy with the demands of our profession to lose sight of what we're trying to do as both a deacon and a lawyer. But it's quite literally to be, holding the towel of the ultimate foot washer, which is Christ, and to serving alongside him in whatever it is that we're doing. And I don't think there's a distinction professionally and in the church when you do that. I think that every lawyer just understands that. It's practiced for a while.
Archdeacon
I can't say every lawyer, actually.
Yeah, that's the Archdeacon Justin. I'll get to it in a minute. I'm going to go somewhere with this. I hope you guys pull me out of it or bail me out if we go too far. But is there an element of suffering that goes with that as well? That's common to that service. And Archdeacon Justin, I'm going to throw it to you and see if that's something that you can comment on as well.
I mean, yeah, I come at this having been a trial lawyer, and you're not a very good trial lawyer if you haven't suffered quite a bit. There's weeks and months where you're not sleeping. I remember one week I did 6 depositions in 5 different cities. You're just bouncing around, going nonstop, and you're not sleeping and you're not eating, and you're I'd inevitably lose a bunch of weight when I was in trial because I'm just not eating, or whatever. But more importantly, I think there's an element of co-suffering in that I had to be the voice for my clients. And the only way for me to be an effective voice for my clients was to actually understand what they're going through. And I'll never forget the wife of someone who was dying, and I was representing them in a case. And she was very closed, and I couldn't get her to articulate very well what she was going through. There was a loss of consortium claim, and I'm trying to help. And, one of those moments where sort of the light bulb goes off, there was this picture of him after he had come home from a very serious surgery, and he's laying in an armchair in their bedroom because he couldn't sleep in a bed or whatever. And I saw behind that was their bed, their marital bed, where his side of the bed was still made. And I pointed that out to her and I said, "What's going on there?" And the floodgates just opened, right? About her years of anxiety and how in all of their years, their married years, being able to reach out and touch him in the middle of the night was what allowed her to go back to sleep. And how now he wasn't in the bed anymore, and she would come to his armchair and curl up on the arm and on the side so that she wasn't putting pressure on him, but so that she could lay next to him and experience just a little bit of physical closeness to him to calm her anxiety, right? These kinds of things that you then are able to understand. As a deacon, that's part of our job, right? Is to be with the people. If we're the link, in a sense, liturgically between the clergy and the people, it's true as well, because we have professions, because we're living sort of in the world, we have a foot in both worlds. We can understand our people sometimes, and even be able to articulate sometimes for the priest what the person is going through. And we have to be able to understand that. And that's something that I really took from my own practice, was just this ability, hopefully, to be able to sit down and understand a little bit what people are suffering with. But then I think the diaconal level is further, because then we take that into our heart and present it to Christ, right? As a lawyer, my job was to go tell a jury about it. As a deacon, my job is to tell Christ about it. And that's a really powerful thing to be able to do.
That's really, really well said. You know, we see these parallels between being a deacon and being a lawyer. I remember we had a summer associate at the firm one year from a very prestigious law school, wasn't doing very well at all. And at some point midsummer, one of our partners talked to him and said, you know, to be good at this job, to be a successful lawyer at this firm, you have to care about the client's problems more than they do. And this person, I give him credit for his honesty, looked right at my partner and said, I don't think I can do that. Service involves at some point taking out the garbage, right? And service means taking that on, and that I think necessarily comes with some acceptance of the possibility of suffering. But going back to some of the things you were saying there, Archdeacon, you all three of you were lawyers before you were deacons. Say a little bit more about some of the skills or some of the things you learned as a lawyer that were helpful, or as Archdeacon points out, applicable in some ways to your service as a deacon. I noticed, Archdeacon, in your recollection of how you became a deacon, you're helping the parish navigate a situation as a lawyer would do through the time of the new priest. So what are some of the skills that you got as a lawyer? And conversely, what, if any, impact did your service as a deacon have on your professional life? The other way around, either in terms of things that you learned that maybe made you a better lawyer, you know, or in terms of particular challenges you faced as a lawyer once you became a deacon. How did that interplay work with you?
I mean, one of the things that obviously you learn as a lawyer, you know, part of our job, I think, whenever we're in any situation, whether professionally or in the church or elsewhere, we've at least been trained how to dissect a problem. And let's take this step by step and go through one step at a time and kind of do the problem solving, right? That's what we do as attorneys. That's not always the way church organizations function. And so it can be very, very valuable, you know, to have attorneys be involved in issues that have absolutely nothing to do with the law, but just let's look at this and work our way through a problem and come to a solution. I joke that the Metropolitan is the only hierarch who travels around with his with his lawyer everywhere he goes. So that's obviously a big thing. Whatever we're doing and wherever we are, there's that opportunity when presented with a problem to just sort of walk it through step by step. I think on the flip side, in terms of my diaconal ministry affecting my legal practice, I think, and this is really, I don't think it's specific to being a deacon, but really just being a Christian, is being able to pray in those moments, right? Being able to have a sense of peace, even when, I don't feel very peaceful. I'm about to give a closing argument. It's crazy and it's chaotic and I'm nervous and stressed and scared, and having something to come back to and have peace is huge. It did make me nervous because there were Orthodox lawyers I litigated against. And so there was this piece of me that was always thinking, boy, I hope I don't scandalize them when they realize that I'm a deacon. And there's a funny anecdote. I had a lawyer I'd litigated against for years. She and I would go at it, cats and dogs, right? Evanthea Spanos. She went to the parish next door. And, she knew I was Orthodox and we would litigate back and forth. And anyway, I had been ordained and I served the funeral of the former priest of that parish. And she calls me up maybe a couple of weeks later. She says, hey, I need to talk to you about the such and such case. But first, was that you at Father Tom Paris's funeral? And I thought, oh, here it goes. I mean, I'd subpoenaed her partner at one time as a rebuttal witness. I mean, we really, right? And I said, yeah, that was me up there. She says, so you're like a deacon now? I said, yeah. And she said, oh, that's great. And we had like this, oh my God. But there is that awareness, right, of now I have to have that in the back of my mind. I'm still representing the church even when I'm litigating, in a sense.
Yeah. Interesting. Deacon Andrew, any kind of skills and lessons that you learned that went both ways, that you applied as a lawyer, applied as a deacon?
Well, I think every lawyer learns how to fast. So and miss meals. So it's very helpful, separate from the diaconal stuff. Yeah, no, in my regulatory practice, one of the things that I've learned how to do over the years and is taking a look not only at the rule, but at the administrative releases, both the notice of proposed release, the proposed release, and the adopting release, to find the context for the rule that you're trying to apply to your client's facts. And that's a skill that I believe is directly related to servanthood in the church, both for men and women, regardless of how they're serving. I believe that attorneys are uniquely trained in that reason, and what the expression that I've since developed through the diaconal area, and this is mainly through adult Christian education. The way that I would articulate that in the spiritual life is, what am I doing and why am I doing it? Because if you just read a rule and you don't get all of the context, you may not know why the rule exists. So the rule's great, but you need the background. But that skill in the parish, what are we doing and why are we doing it? Really keeping track of the institutional reasons, not in the sense of thwarting the development, but really understanding why we started to do things a particular way, and whether it's time to do them differently, or whether it's time to remind ourselves about what we're doing and why we were doing it that way. For me, that is a skill set as a lawyer that I think every lawyer can bring to serving their communities. And it certainly is a skill set that I feel, I can just feel that it's the legal training and the legal experiences that I've had when I have the deacon hat on. So
yeah, that's really interesting. You and I both come out of the John Abdullah clergy tree, and we here have taken to saying, why do we do what we do?
yeah,
Similar formulation, which maybe that legal training back in my head at some point to say, what's the rationale here? What's the reasoning behind this? What's the purpose?
Yeah, because in parish life,
Yeah.
sometimes things can take on a purpose that's just a purpose unto their own, that is not actually serving the body of Christ in any meaningful way, because it's become its own thing rather than what it once was. So
And
I
therefore,
just think that,
and therefore tradition.
yeah. So
Right. Yeah. Why
that's
do we
right.
have to do? Yeah. Deacon David, anything to add on that in terms
You know,
of?
I'm going to get real practical. If you're going to be a successful lawyer, at some point you have to have some modicum of time management, and that is one that I think you can, if you're going to help a priest manage his ministry, manage the altar, manage acolytes, manage whatever other ministry you're also going to do on the side with, in addition, you have to have great time management skills. And so that's one thing. Here's another one that I think that I've gone in the other direction. As I said before, deacons are servants. I mean, servants of the king, but servants, right? Humility is a big ingredient of that. Humility is a really important aspect of practicing law too. I mean, a lot of times we have to remember that we're not the principal, right? We're the agent in our professional life. We are representing someone. So we don't get to tell them what their position is, right? They tell us what their position is, and we help them, understand the risks and the rewards. But sometimes we have to set aside our personal preferences, or even, what we think might be best, in favor of what the client wants, right? And advocate for the client. And so that takes humility. And so I think that's a skill that I think bleeds from the other direction. I don't think lawyers don't necessarily naturally, you don't get out of law school and have a big dose of humility. Maybe the bar exam gives people a big dose of humility for us, but it's kind of temporary. I don't think anybody comes out of certainly the first year of law school. I don't know. Anybody who was ever married in the first year of law school, I don't think the spouse ever said, man, that course in humility coming out of the 1L year was really powerful. But I think that I think it's an important virtue to cultivate, and I think the diaconate is a great proving ground for that.
Well, being a lawyer is, you can do wonders for your humility, as I think, we find that out the hard way. I found what you said really fascinating, because I think I was a much more ready to approach the mystical theology of the Eastern Church after I had practiced law for 20 years, after a lot had I think been rubbed off me in terms of what I thought I knew. And I was starting to come to the realization, like I think good lawyers do, that the more I knew, the less I knew.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's true. Yes.
And it's so that prepared me for, you think you're going to get this, but you're just, the deeper you go into it, the deeper you realize it's going to be. And,
right.
As a young lawyer who wanted to show off, so to speak, or at least look impressive, or think they mastered everything, guess what? It's not that simple. And the farther you get into it, even the facts, sometimes the farther you get into the facts, the more you realize you don't know them as fully as you might think.
Yeah.
And,
I think you're exactly right about this, Father. So I think the farther you get into your career, the more readily humility comes, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, certainly the more comfortable you are admitting it.
Yeah,
it wasn't until I practiced law for some time that I was comfortable telling clients, I don't know.
That's right.
I'll have to look that up. It could be something else that I don't anticipate. So,
right.
Yeah. Let me get just another kind of area here that Archdeacon Justin kind of reminded me of when he talked about his dealings with another Orthodox lawyer who saw him in action, both as a lawyer and as a deacon, which is relatively rare, but it does happen. You know, when I was a deacon and also practicing law, sometimes I felt like my partners at the law firm saw me as the resident clergyman. And when I was with my fellow clergy, I think they saw me as the lawyer in the room. How do you think your colleagues in the profession view your service as a deacon, and how do your parishioners view you as a lawyer, if at all? And what impact does that have on your relationships and on your ministry in the parish and without the parish? Deacon David, you want to start on that?
Yes. So at the office, so I managed, like I said, a large team, about 70 or 80 people. And so like the direct reports, like the folks that are closest to me that see me every day, I mean, they certainly know that I'm very churchy. And they see icons, they follow me on social media, they see references to my church, they see the occasional picture of me in sparkly vestments, but most of them don't have any idea what any of that means. And if they ask me, of course I will tell them. I'm careful not to cross any legal boundaries, and so over the years we've had some interesting conversations about that. And it's interesting. I can remember one time where I had one work colleague who was having a very difficult personal situation, and she came into my office and she was crying, and she said, look, I know that you're someone who could pray for me, and I would just like to ask you to pray for me. And she explained what her situation was, and I prayed for her. And so I'd never explained to her what the Orthodox Church was and what the diaconate is and all of that, but somehow she kind of knew that there was something different. And so, yeah, there is this sense, right? They see that I don't eat meat for the entire springtime. I mean, there's these strange things about me, but I'm not all that strange. There's strange things, but I don't ever play with snakes or anything like that. So the strange religious things that that they have in their mind, but by and large, they're sort of unchurched, and they don't really have a context for understanding what the Orthodox Church would be. But it's kind of baby steps with them. At church, it's funny. The adults all understand that I'm a lawyer, and they do. So there is always if there's a legal question, I'm absolutely going to get it. But I've taught our high school Sunday school class for probably 20 years now. And I'm not sure that those kids know that I'm a lawyer. I mean, they don't ever think of it that way. I'm just the deacon, and which is fine. And so we
Isn't
really
that what JD stands for?
What's that?
Isn't that what JD stands for?
Just deacon. That's good. I like that.
Yeah. It does now. Deacon Andrew, any thoughts on that? How do your colleagues view you? How's the parish view you?
I honestly don't know. I think it's the same thing as Deacon David was saying. I don't know that very many people in the parish know that I'm a lawyer, and the ones that do, I don't think they care. And I don't know that most people at work know that I'm a deacon. I don't have social media. I intentionally try to keep the worlds very separate, not, because I'm ashamed of either one. It's just that it's just how I've approached it. And I don't, when I'm at work, I'm at work. And when I'm at the church, I'm at the church. And it's just how I have managed it over the years.
Yeah. Archdeacon Justin, this kind of started with you on your recollection of the Orthodox lawyer. I actually had a partner who was a Catholic minor seminary boy, who every time I would blurt something out like lawyers do, in a moment of frustration or panic or whatever, he would turn to me and say, "You shouldn't say that," because he knew I was a deacon. So, Archdeacon Justin, anything more to offer on the
No,
relationship with colleagues and how they see you both ways and
yeah, not really. It has been interesting in terms of within the church, in particular clergy brotherhood meetings. You know, the guard drops and people just sort of have conversations. But I shared with Ken, I had one not too long ago where I want to be careful about how I exactly say this, but basically there was some discussion about some hiring decisions that one of the priests was making that was not at all good under California law. And, you know, all of a sudden you're in a clergy brotherhood meeting and I have to speak up and say, Father, I really wish you wouldn't say that in that way. Let me remind you that this is the law. At which point the Metropolitan then puts me on the spot and says, could you give a brief overview of employment discrimination law for clergy, like right now? And, you know, it was actually interesting because it's probably a place that lawyers generally would not go. And generally, with all of my love for priests, there is a tendency among some clergy to think that they're sort of bulletproof when it comes to these issues, and they are very much not. And it can actually be helpful a little bit to have a lawyer in the room saying, don't say that and don't do that. So yeah, in that sense, I become the lawyer in the room, not the other clergyman.
yeah. The one thing I wanted to mention, I think this it occurs to me as we're talking here. Yeah, obviously there are challenges of being a deacon and a lawyer and having, again, 1 foot in both worlds or 2 feet in each world, however you want to look at it at the same time. I had a deacon tell me years ago, more experienced deacon than I was at the time, that as time would go by, I would feel more and more comfortable in that church world, less and less comfortable in the legal world. Clearly, when I first started, I had practiced law for 20 years when I became a deacon. So being a deacon was the uncomfortable one to be in. There came a time when that kind of evened out. And then, as he had predicted, I became more and more comfortable in the church world than I did in the legal world. Can you take a little bit of time here as we're getting close to the end and see if there's any other questions people have, but can you talk in particular specifically about the kind of challenges you face and how you deal with them as clergy and lawyers? Maybe lessons all of us clergy and lay might learn from how you deal with the challenges that you have in these roles at one time or another. Archdeacon Justin, I'll stay with you on that for a minute.
You know, yeah, I can relate to that in a sense. And, you know, to some extent, I'm the worst person to answer it because I dodged the issue in that I ended up having opportunities to be much more in ministry. And so I ended up leaving the law firm and being in ministry full time. So in a sense, I didn't resolve that issue so much as I just sort of avoided it. But there is a truth. Part of what I really struggled with was being a trial lawyer and in a very aggressive firm. Some of the things that I used to do towards opposing counsel or particularly belligerent witnesses and the like didn't feel very diaconal to me. And you know, one of the things actually, I think Ray Lanier made this comment at the very first Orthodox attorney gathering we had in Newport Beach some years back. He commented that it was a sin for lawyers to objectify opposing counsel. That one of the things that we struggle with is we tend to objectify opposing counsel rather than seeing them as the human beings that we as Christians are called to see them as. And that hit me very, very square in the face because that is how I often would talk about opposing counsel. I would, you know, with the other lawyers in my office or whatever. And I really struggled with the notion of how do I aggressively litigate, as I always had, in a way that felt right as a deacon. And that was a tension that was there. And like I said, I don't know that I ever really resolved it. I kind of avoided it. But it is a tension that can exist.
Yeah. Deacon Andrew, any thoughts on that?
I don't know. I think that I've spent most of my time in large law firms. So I'd say from 2002 until the present moment, this is probably the smallest of the firms that I've been in. I was in-house for a while, and then I ended up back in private practice in 2002. So for me, you know, I would say the biggest challenge, it's not so much what I do. What I do is pretty darn boring. There's not a lot of ethical, when you're, you know, an investment management lawyer and a derivatives lawyer managing risk. It's what it sounds like. So I don't have ethical conundrums. The opposing counsel in negotiations sometimes objectify themselves, but it's not, that's more their problem than mine. But what I do think is a challenge, and again, I don't think this is unique to, I think this is a challenge for every Christian that's living their faith, not just deacons, is that our profession is set up to have, you know, carrots that are very much materialistically driven carrots. And I'm not saying that as some, you know, pie in the sky, anti-materialistic type person. You know, our operating assumption is that matter is not just good, but it's very good because God created it. Yet there's this tension that's an internal tension between wanting to, you know, smash and grab more and being at the church. And, you know, sometimes you hear these negative voices in your head like, oh, I could have been this or that if I hadn't done this or that. So there's this internal tension that goes on. But I think people experience that with their families. I think people experience that with their friends. I don't think it's unique to the diaconal ministry. I think if you're a Christian and you're living your faith, you end up saying that there are just, you can't do all that everybody else is doing. And so sometimes you feel like you may not be as successful in certain regards. To me, that's probably the biggest tension that I've had between, you know, not taking the bait and then you still want to take the bait, which is a form of suffering in itself, right? Is that you're like caught in that existential, I want more, but I really don't want more, but I still have all of this salivation like a Pavlovian dog to want more. So, you know, whatever. I guess the mercy is death at some point.
Well, I suppose Saint Ambrose said, "Without the contest, there are no crowns."
Yeah,
So thank God for the struggle in a way, because this is where we work these things out. Deacon David, any thoughts on the challenges?
I mean, I have to echo Deacon Andrew on this one. You know, for me, the biggest struggles have been to take care of the responsibilities that God has given me. So there was a certain point in my career where sort of there was a fork in the road, and one direction would have been, you know, one career arc, which would have been very challenging to maintain, you know, to raise a family of 6 kids. And that would have been tough. And so my wife and I actively made the decision not to take that, you know, which sort of looked down the path and see what it looked like. We decided not to do that. And instead we took this position and allowed us to raise our children the way we wanted to in the church. And thank God, all still in the church as adults. And then also pursue the diaconate. You know, I can't complain. I'm also, you know, as Deacon Andrew said, you know, there's pluses and minuses. And you know, the minuses are that you don't make the big boatloads of money that you could make if you did other things. but the pluses are, the rewards far outweigh whatever those other pluses would have been. So
The benefits are out of this world.
they are indeed, literally.
That's right. Well, Ken, I don't know if we have any other comments or questions, or if anybody had anything they would like to chat about.
Well, since it is almost at the hour, what I'd like to do is kind of formally close this. But then if anyone wants to stick around, whenever I go to conferences and stuff, I love the chatting with people after the formal program is over. So if anyone wants to stick around and chat for a little bit, you're welcome to. But thank you so much, Father David and Archdeacon Justin, Protodeacon David, and Deacon Andrew. I always, whenever I was in those moments of wondering if I was in the right profession going into the law, once I became Orthodox, I was able to think of the practice of law and its struggles as a lifelong ascetic struggle. It's can be a podvig, right? And so hearing your experiences kind of validated that, and it really is encouraging. So I can't believe the hour is already over. I could go on listening to you all for much longer, but in respect of everyone's time, I'm going to turn off the recording. But like I said, anyone feel free to stick around. And